There's an old Folgers can on a shelf in a garage outside Crossville, Tennessee, half full of gray powder, and the man who owns it grows tomatoes on a concrete patio that put my raised beds to shame. No yard, no garden dirt, just pots. Big black nursery pots lined up along a south-facing wall, and every one of them heavy with fruit by the first week of July. A soil scientist would tell you that shouldn't happen. A pot runs out. The dirt in a container isn't like the open ground, where the roots can go looking for what they need. A pot is a closed box, and a closed box goes empty. Yet here's Harlan, 71 years old, feeding half his street off a patio, and the only thing he ever buys for those plants is the potting mix he starts them in. What's in that coffee can is free. So are 4 other things I'm going to show you, 5 in all, and none of them will cost you more than the price of the jar you keep them in. A few minutes a week, that's the whole ask. The people who sell fertilizer would rather you never heard any of this, because you can't put a patent on a bucket of wood ash. And wood ash is where we start. So why wood ash, of all things? What a fire leaves behind is the mineral skeleton of the tree. When wood burns clean, most of it goes up as smoke and gas, and what settles in the bottom of the stove is the part that came out of the ground in the first place. A good hardwood ash runs somewhere around 3 to 7% potassium, and it carries calcium too, a fair bit of it, in the form of calcium carbonate. That's the same lime they sell in 50-pound sacks at the farm store. The tree pulled it up over decades, and the fire handed it back to you in one afternoon. Potassium is the nutrient a container plant burns through fastest. It's the one that moves sugar out of the leaves and into the fruit. A tomato with plenty of potassium tastes like a tomato. A tomato starved of it grows pale and watery, big enough to look fine on the vine and disappointing on the plate. Old J.I. Rodale, the man who put the word organic on a magazine cover back in the 40s, used to say the fertility of the whole operation walks out the door in the harvest, and you have to keep walking it back in. Wood ash is one way to walk it back in. Here's the mistake, and almost everybody makes it the first time. They get excited, and they dump. A big scoop into every pot, figuring if a little is good, a coffee can's worth is better. And 2 weeks later, the leaves go yellow and the plant sulks, and they can't figure out why the free miracle turned on them. The reason is pH. Wood ash is alkaline, strongly so, and it pushes your dirt sweet in a hurry. Most vegetables want the ground a touch on the sour side, right around 6.5. Pile on ash, and you sail past that. And once the pH climbs too high, the plant physically cannot pull iron and a few other minerals out of the dirt, no matter how much is sitting there. The pantry's full, and the door's locked. So you go light. A rounded tablespoon for a pot the size of a 5-gallon bucket, scratched into the top inch and watered in, no more than every 3 or 4 weeks through the growing season. For a smaller pot, half that. Keep the can bone dry between uses, because the minute ash gets damp, it starts turning into lye, and lye will scorch roots. This is also why you keep it up on a shelf, away from the kids and the dog. And 2 things never go in it. Never ash from charcoal briquettes, which are full of binders and starter chemicals you don't want anywhere near food. And never ash on your blueberries or azaleas or anything that likes it acid, because for them the sweet dirt is poison. You'll know it's working in a couple of weeks. The new growth comes in a deeper green, the flowering picks up, and if you've got tomatoes or peppers, the fruit sets heavier and colors up sooner. Now you won't find this on an end cap at the garden center. And there's a plain reason for that. A tree gave it to you for nothing. Nobody can bag up your own fireplace and sell it back to you, so nobody has a reason to tell you it's worth keeping. It just quietly goes out with the trash every week. A bucket of potassium and lime hauled to the curb. Wood ash feeds the plant. The next thing I'll show you doesn't feed the plant at all. It feeds something underneath the plant, something you can't see. And once you understand what that is, you'll never look at a pot of dirt the same way again. Dig your fingers into good ground in the woods, the black crumbly stuff under the leaf litter, and you are holding more living creatures in one handful than there are people on the earth. Bacteria, fungi, little grazing animals too small to see. A soil microbiologist named Elaine Ingham Spent years at Oregon State University back in the 80s and 90s putting numbers to that hidden crowd, and the picture she drew changed how a lot of us think about dirt. Her point was simple, and it's worth saying plainly. The plant does not eat the fertilizer you give it. Not directly. Most of what a root takes up has to be handed to it first by the microbes living against that root, chewed up and made ready. Feed those microbes and they feed the plant. Starve them, and the plant goes hungry with a full pantry. Here's the trouble with a pot. Bagged potting mix comes to you close to sterile. It's been heat-treated, it's clean, and clean is exactly the problem, because clean means dead. There's no woods next door for the little workers to walk in from. A new pot is a nice empty apartment building with nobody living in it. You fix that with a brew. And the brew is about the easiest thing in this whole video. Take a big handful of finished compost, or a scoop of worm castings if you've got a bin, and drop it in an old pillowcase or a paint strainer bag. Sink that in a 5-gallon bucket of water. Now the trick that makes it come alive. 1 good tablespoon of unsulfured molasses, the blackstrap kind from the baking aisle, stirred in until it dissolves. That molasses is pure sugar, and sugar is what the bacteria eat. You are, in the most real way, baking a sourdough starter. Same idea, exactly. You keep a little colony going, and you feed it so it multiplies, and here you're doing it in a bucket instead of a crock on the counter. Let it sit somewhere warmish for a day and a half, and give it a stir whenever you walk past. What you want is for the water to go a little foamy and smell like fresh dirt after rain. Sweet and earthy. Alive. Then you pour it over your pots, about a quart per plant, and water it right down to the roots. Now the mistake. And it's a bad one because it undoes the whole thing. 2 of them, really. The first is chlorine. If your tap water is city water, it's got chlorine in it, and chlorine is put there for one job, to kill microbes. It won't know the difference between the bug in a pipe and the good ones in your bucket, so you let your water sit out overnight in an open bucket first, and the chlorine gases off on its own, free. The second mistake is time. This brew is alive, and alive things go off. If you let that bucket sit 3 or 4 days, the oxygen runs out, and a whole different crowd moves in, the kind that smells like a ditch, like rotten eggs. If it stinks foul, don't pour it on your plants. Dump it and start over. Good brew smells like a spring morning. Bad brew smells like something died. You're not feeding the plant. Write that on a note and stick it on the window over the sink. You're feeding the millions of little mouths that feed the plant, and when you get that part right, everything above the ground takes care of itself. But there's a question none of this answers yet, and it's the one that trips up more container gardeners than any other. What if you're feeding and the plant still won't produce? For that we have to go back 180 years, to a German chemist and a wooden barrel. In 1840, a chemist named Justus von Liebig wrote down an idea so simple that farmers had half known it forever, but nobody had said it clean. He called it the law of the minimum, and a fellow named Carl Sprengel had actually spelled it out a dozen years before him, so give the man his due. The idea goes like this. A plant's growth is not set by how much food it has in total. It's set by whichever single thing it has the least of. Liebig drew it as a barrel. Picture the old wooden kind, the staves standing up around the sides, held with hoops. Now picture the staves cut to different heights, one short, the rest tall. You go to fill that barrel with water, and it doesn't matter how tall the other staves stand. The water pours out over the short one, and the barrel only ever holds as much as that shortest stave allows. Every stave is a nutrient. The short one is whatever your plant is missing. And here is the hard truth of it. The one nobody at the garden center will ever tell you, because it's bad for business. Adding more of what the plant already has plenty of does exactly nothing. If your short stave is magnesium, you can pour nitrogen on that pot till the cows come home and you will not get one more tomato. You'll just get a taller barrel with the same leak. This is the most expensive mistake in container gardening, and I want you to really sit with it, because it costs people whole seasons. A plant looks a little off. The leaves aren't quite right. Growth has stalled, so the gardener reaches for the thing on the shelf that says it makes plants grow, and 9 times out of 10, that's a nitrogen feed, the stuff that greens things up fast. And it does green them up, lush and dark, and still no fruit. Because nitrogen was never the short stave. They keep pouring on the one nutrient the plant already had, and the real shortage sits there untouched, and by August they've given up and decided their thumb just isn't green. More of what a plant already has will never fix a shortage of what it doesn't. Read that twice. So what's the short stave usually in a pot? More often than folks realize, it's magnesium. Magnesium sits at the dead center of every chlorophyll molecule in every green leaf, the way the yolk sits in an egg. No magnesium, no chlorophyll, no green, no sugar making. And magnesium washes out of a pot with the water fast, faster than most things, so containers run short on it all the time. The tell is older leaves, going yellow between the veins, while the veins themselves stay green, like a green leaf skeleton in a yellowing sheet. When you see that, a light dose of Epsom salt, which is nothing but magnesium and sulfur, about a teaspoon dissolved in a gallon of water once a month, brings it right back. Calcium's often the other short stave, and for that a spoon of finely crushed oyster shell, the kind sold cheap in the poultry aisle for laying hens, works slow and steady. Grind it fine or it'll sit there for years doing nothing. The point isn't magnesium or calcium in particular. The point is you stop guessing, you stop pouring the same thing on out of habit, and you start asking which stave is short. Find the leak, and you can fill the barrel. Once you've got that in your head, you're ready for the one I get the most letters about, the feed I save for plants that need to do something big, like set a heavy crop or bounce back from a hard, dry August. It's a brew, like the microbe one, but stronger, and every single thing in it is there for a reason. This one I call the whole pantry feed, and it's the closest thing I've got to a secret weapon. 5 things go in a bucket. Each one earns its spot. First, a small handful of kelp meal, or a splash of liquid seaweed if that's what the store carries. Seaweed's been growing in the richest broth on earth, ocean water, and it's soaked up trace minerals your dirt may have run out of years ago. The important part isn't even the minerals, though. Seaweed carries natural plant hormones, cytokinins mostly, the chemical messengers that tell a plant to branch out and put on new growth. Think of it as handing the plant its marching orders. Second, a handful of alfalfa meal, the same stuff sold as rabbit pellets if you buy the plain kind, with nothing added. Check the bag, no molasses coating, no salt. Alfalfa's got a growth stimulant in it called triacontanol. Long word, real thing, and it does something you can see. Plants fed a little alfalfa green up and thicken up in a way that's out of proportion to the plain nitrogen it carries. Old-timers who kept rabbits always seem to have the best gardens, and this is a good part of why. Third, comfrey, if you can get your hands on it, and once you plant one, you'll never be rid of it. So plant it in a spot you don't mind losing. Comfrey sends a taproot down 6 feet and hauls up potassium from deep in the ground where most roots never reach. You chop a few of the big leaves, wilt them a day, and toss them in the bucket. Rot them down, and you've got potassium tea about as rich as anything you can buy. Fourth, your used tea leaves. Not coffee, tea. Slit open the spent bags from the week, a Lipton or whatever you drink, and shake the leaves into the bucket. Tea leaves carry a fair bit of nitrogen and a load of tannins, and as they break down, they feed both the plant and the microbes slow and easy. And fifth, back comes that tablespoon of blackstrap molasses. Because now you've built a feast for the little workers underground, and you want to ring the dinner bell. Cover it with water, let it steep 3 or 4 days in the shade, stir it when you think of it, and then, and this is the part people skip, you cut it way down before it ever touches a plant. 1 part brew to about 10 parts plain water. It should come out the color of weak iced tea. No darker. Which brings me to the thing I most need to knock down. Because the internet is dead wrong about it and it does real harm. You've all heard that Epsom salt is the answer to blossom end rot. That black sunken patch on the bottom of a tomato. People swear by it. They dump Epsom salt on at the first black spot. And they're not just wasting it. They can make it worse. Blossom end rot is not a magnesium problem. It's a calcium problem, and more than that, it's a watering problem. The plant couldn't move calcium up to the fruit because the water went from bone dry to soaked and back. Epsom salt is magnesium, and magnesium and calcium ride into the root through the same door. Flood the plant with magnesium, and you crowd the calcium out and starve the fruit worse. The fix is steady water and a calcium source, never a scoop of the very thing that competes with it. Here's the mistake with the big brew. And it's the same sin as the wood ash, just wearing a different hat. Too strong. A pot is a closed box, remember, and salts and minerals have nowhere to run. Overfeed a pot and the stuff builds up in the dirt like scale in a kettle, and one day the plant just stops. Roots burned, dirt crusted white on top. So you feed light, you dilute hard, and once a month or so you water a pot heavy with plain water till it runs out the bottom good, and to rinse the buildup down and away. A container needs a clean out the way a chimney does. Feed this to a plant that's about to set fruit, and you'll see why the old folks guarded these recipes. Because these recipes are old. Older than the store you buy your fertilizer from. Older, in fact, than the whole idea of buying fertilizer at all. In 1909, a German chemist named Fritz Haber figured out how to pull nitrogen straight out of the air and turn it into fertilizer. And a few years later, a man named Carl Bosch built the machines to do it by the trainload. It was one of the biggest things that ever happened to the human race. And I mean that flatly. That one invention feeds something close to half the people alive today. Without it, billions would go hungry. So I'm not here to tell you it was a mistake, but it did something quiet on the side. Within a generation or two, folks forgot. The bag showed up on the shelf, cheap and easy. And all the old knowledge of how you keep dirt alive without a bag started slipping out of the family. Your great-grandparents knew things about feeding ground that your parents never learned, because by then you could just buy the answer. Before that bag, there was a man named F.H. King, an American, who in 1911 wrote down what he saw traveling through China and Japan. He found farms that had grown food on the same ground for 4,000 years without wearing it out. 4,000 years. We can't keep a suburban lawn alive for 4,000 days, and the whole secret, King wrote, was that they threw nothing away. Every scrap, every trimming, every bit of waste from the kitchen and the barn went back into the ground it came from. A little later, an Englishman named Sir Albert Howard worked out a careful way to compost all of it. The indoor method, he called it, after the part of India where he learned it. And a lot of what we now call organic gardening traces straight back to those two men writing down what old farmers already knew. There's a whole graveyard of civilizations that didn't listen. Places that mined their dirt and gave nothing back, and turned their fields to dust, and then were gone. Dirt outlasts empires, or it ends them. The mistake here isn't a technique, it's a habit of mind, and nearly all of us have it. We throw the good stuff away. The carrot tops, the potato peels, the crushed shells, the water you boiled the greens in that's full of leached minerals, all of it goes down the drain or out to the curb, the exact food your pots are starving for. And here's the one old trick I'll leave you with. Because the modern science finally caught up and admitted the old-timers were right. Up and down the New England coast, farmers used to bury a fish, or just a handful of fish scraps, down under each plant when they set it out. Nobody's quite sure anymore who taught whom. The fish rots down slow over the season and hands the plant nitrogen, phosphorus, and calcium right when it wants them, and feeds the microbes besides. Every bottle of fish emulsion on the garden store shelf today is that same idea, poured into plastic and marked up. A rough-cut mackerel head buried a foot down under a tomato in May will carry that plant clear into fall, which is really what all 5 of these come down to. 5 things. A can of wood ash for potassium and a little lime, gone in with a light hand. A living brew of compost and molasses to wake up the workers in the dirt. Epsom salt or crushed shell to fill in whichever stave is short. The whole pantry feed for the plants doing the heavy lifting. And the oldest one of all, the scraps you were about to throw out, put back where they came from instead. The next time you scrape a plate into the trash, stop for a second before you tip it. That's not garbage in your hand. That's the potassium and the calcium and the slow nitrogen your pots have been quietly begging for, on its way to a dumpster. None of this came from me. It came from a coffee can in a garage in Tennessee. From a woman up in the Skagit Valley who kept fish scraps in the freezer all winter for spring. From grandparents who fed their dirt without ever knowing the name of a single molecule in it. They just paid attention and handed it down. If somebody you know has pots on a porch that never quite took off, send them this. It costs you nothing, and it might change the way they see a banana peel for the rest of their life. Grow something worth passing on, and feed your dirt better than it fed you.